Hello, good morning. My name is John Enoch from Amazon Web Services, and I'm here with my colleague Neil Hall. And over the next hour, we're going to hopefully share something useful with you. And that will be around how AWS is helping governments to innovate, drive agility in their operations, and overall reduce their IT spending. So we're very interested to share best practices and thoughts on how you can get more value for less money. Now, the first half of this, first 20 minutes, I'll be talking about cost optimization. And you could see from the screen here, I've got two key words on the front cover to say it's about optimizing finance and operation workflows to reduce the cost of cloud workloads. So workflows are how your organizations operate. They are the nerve center, the circulation, the lifeblood of how stuff gets done. Workloads are simply an enabler. So we want to be focused on how you get stuff done so you can get more done. How you put cloud workloads into an environment where they're architected properly, where the controls are in place to drive good practices and how they're managed and cost is reduced. That is the subject of this webinar today. So, first of all, let's have a think about the state of cloud cost management. Now, cost management in IT has always been more art than science, I would say. If I was to think to one of my former employers and in consulting and how they looked at a data center and found that their customer had more than 20% more stuff in it than they actually knew, it's clear that things evolve over time. Perhaps things aren't documented, and the controls which would ideally be in place just aren't possible. So how do we change that? And how do we get to a point where you can say it's worth investing a certain amount in tooling to generate a change of something else, an improvement? So what level of investment in time and tooling would you need to make in order to achieve a cost saving that's acceptable to you? So first of all, just how bad is the cost efficiency in cloud usage? Now, I'd love to say to you that cloud has opened a new era and that everything has changed from traditional IT. Problem is, whilst cloud has come in and the technology and the things which could be done with it as a tool have changed, the practices around IT have generally not. So you get the same kind of outcomes with a different tool, funnily enough. So here's two stats. So Flexera estimate that about 35% of cloud spend is just due to poor management of cloud wastage, as would be the case with traditional IT. We got a quote from Gartner saying, through 2020, 45% of organizations that lift and shift migrate to cloud without optimizing, in other words, without thinking about how they can get more value for less money, will over provision by as much as 55% and will overspend by 70% in the first 18 months. What this is really saying is there is a very big difference between the price and the actual cost. And I would encourage you to think not in terms of IT when you think of cloud, traditional IT, big boxes, changing from data centers to cloud. No. Try to think of it in a different sense. Think of it as the mobile industry in the late 1990s, where there's very little control over equipment, a lot of people using things on a multi-tenanted platform, fair amount of shadow IT, if you like, people bringing their own devices and things like that. And over time, things have evolved. So mobile is very well locked down and spend is very well controlled. We're just at the early part of that process. And I would say if you've gone through this with mobile, you know how to do it. We just have to make sure you've got the right tools and best practices. So let's have a look at a few things that we're seeing as well from the market. There was a very good survey done by 451 Research for one of our partners, Aptio, earlier this year, around the spend in IT, spend on cloud, and how well IT is being managed. What they found was, scarily, 80% of organizations are managing cloud cost and usage using Excel spreadsheets. I must say, that is quite scary. You have no control on that basis. And for the difference between IT and the business, it was found that whilst IT didn't feel that they had great control, with 37% feeling that they overspend, finance was very clear that the overspending was massive. Now, thinking about that, 58% admit overspending. That usually means not that there's been a failure on their part. It just means that there has been a case of the current system that has worked for many years is no longer working. And without new thinking and new tooling and new processes, that will continue. So how do we get better control? Well, first of all, let's just think about how you can massively waste money on cloud adoption. It is a choice. It doesn't matter what price you get if you don't use the service in a cost-effective way, just as if you perhaps went on holiday in the early 2000s with a mobile phone and watch a movie and come back and get a massive bill. You had a great price, but you didn't use it in a cost-effective way. So these are the things that we see will drive unnecessary cost. Having a return on investment has a lot of decision dependency. If organizations move a load of things to cloud and then don't turn anything off because it's too difficult or the approvals aren't there, they double run and they increase the cost. Similarly, I've heard the head of shared services for a large energy company describe cloud cost management without tooling, as in using Excel spreadsheets, as a game of whack-a-mole with lots of money. Costs will pop up everywhere. With cloud, you can lock things down, you can tag them, you can make sure that nothing is active unless it's owned. That gives a culture of accountability, which really gets into the process. We have customers who will only allow cloud assets to run when they've been tagged. It's a very good process for reducing cost. Another area in which cost is easily controlled is by making smart choices, trade-offs. So for example, you have a choice of having total flexibility with, for example, Amazon EC2 compute on demand, where you'll pay a much lower price than if it was on premise, but you'll pay a much higher price than if you take a trade-off and you say, we are going to use this, our utilization is high enough, we want to book this asset. And then you'll get a cost saving of around 70%. If you were to use our spot service, where our customers can bid for underutilized or unutilized capacity around our network, you could get compute for pennies on the dollar. So it's very much a choice. If you want the simplest thing that you don't monitor, which would be on-demand compute, then you'll pay more than if you make smarter choices. Another thing that often happens, especially with DevOps teams, is whether or not the project they're running requires a massive spec for compute, storage, or whatever, it's not uncommon for them to actually ask for the biggest available, just in case. That results in levels of utilization and poor right sizing, as in what the equipment is being used for is not in line with the spec of the equipment. And if you don't question that, you pay more for it. So every time you go down an instance size on AWS, you save 50%. It's a very simple question to ask. It's a control. Your risk and controls framework will already have these controls for on-premise IT. We're just suggesting you amend them for cloud. Also, you can do so much with automation. Now we have our Lambda service, which is serverless, where you can automate functions like posting data to a database or running queries or running batch files, whatever it happens to be. When you automate, you take out human error. You also take out the need to hire specialist people with specialist skills. One of the key things that you should probably automate is the tooling through which you manage the cost of cloud and how that cost is allocated. So there's a culture of ownership and cost awareness. And turn stuff off. You can have automation to make sure elasticity is in place. And that means, just like the light switch is by the door, you leave the room, you turn it off. You can turn off cloud in exactly the same way. I've actually had somebody in the professional services industry tell me the thing that they like most about AWS is it's easy to turn it off. It's a great compliment. Also, if you don't monitor things, you might just find that you've got a little S3 bucket of storage sitting there collecting loads and loads of system logs that have really no purpose, simply because it wasn't properly looked at when it was set up. And we strongly recommend engaging AWS with our well-architected review, which, if you like, is kind of an audit of how well cloud is being managed and how well it's being architected. If you have multiple accounts across the business, you're not going to benefit from volume discounts. If you have a consolidated view, you will. And one of the most common areas I see of wastage is actually project failure. So if you have looked, for example, at McKinsey, you'll see that the project failure rate on digital transformation is estimated to be around 70%. Now, that was a 2015 statement. Last one I looked at from last year was saying a success rate of around 14%. Now, it doesn't mean that digital transformation will fail. It simply means that the way in which you approach it determines your outcome. The decisions you make will determine what you get. So if you're overconfident on executing and haven't budgeted for, external partners to support with their skills and the tools in order to give you the data to make decisions, you're in risky ground. Also, without engaging the organization and asking different people what they want and why from a change is another cause of failure. And this is very much in line with what you'll see from the likes of JP Cota and Leading Change as a classic book. So you need to make decisions around cloud if you're to save money. It's not just deploying the technology, like any tool, and this is a business tool, it's how you use it. So where are you with your cost management today in cloud? Here's a classic picture of how individuals respond to change. Now, cloud is a big change. It's not really an IT decision, according to our customers, like Fabio Veronosi from Enel, who did a massive transformation at scale and speed into AWS, energy company, based in Italy, over 60 million customers. He said at our reInvent conference in 2017 that you must always approach cloud as a business decision, not a technology decision. Otherwise, you'll only end up with technology-related outcomes, which are very small. So if you're looking at big change, this is where people will typically go. And you have to get to that point where there is a plan, there is consensus, and there is an agreed way forward, whether or not everyone agrees or not. There is commitment. Now, we do have tools to help you through that process of change. We can help you get a heat map of your organization and how they see change enabled by cloud. But the core changes in workflows, the workloads, should not be the sole focus. The IT is the enabler, not the end game. So a few things that we'll get from our partners, and again, here's one from Aptio. There's also Cloud Health, there's Cloud Checker. There are many in this sense. Aptio have given me some stats. These are the sort of things which they find are the best practices if you want to reduce your cloud spend to a level where you can say that you're being efficient. And then what they're really saying is, would this sort of outcome be worthwhile to you? Would this visibility actually be worth paying for? And if you think about it, if the wastage, going back to the Flexera stat, is about 35%, or the Gartner stat about 70% in that migration case, what percentage of your spend would you sacrifice to win back that that wastage? And what level of assurance would you require that it's actually going to happen? And that's something we encourage you to have with our partners, Aptio, Cloud Health, Cloud Checker, and others. So let's look at the business case on cloud. As I mentioned before, the outcome you get will depend on how you see the problem, how you frame it. Now, here's a great way of thinking about cloud, and this is from the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon. I think he's nailed it. He's saying, think about workflows before workloads. Now, he doesn't say that, but his messaging is saying that. He's saying, I used to think that cloud was just another form of outsourcing, but it's not. It's about enabling far greater capabilities, rapid scale and elasticity, doing stuff that you couldn't otherwise do on premise, increasing developers' efficiency by multiples because they're not waiting for anything. It's there with a click. They can get stuff done. And frictionless experience for developers. If you give developers that frictionless experience, those tools they enjoy using, and the ability to get stuff done, they will probably enjoy their jobs and they will want to stay with your organization. If you don't, they will go somewhere else. I actually spoke to the head of compliance at a large bank who came to an IT event because he was concerned about the number of people in his staff who were leaving because they found the technology too difficult. In other words, the technology where those workloads were being run was not enabling his workflow of enabling compliance, and people were leaving. Very avoidable. That's the big improvement you drive with cloud. Think about this from Jamie Dimon. He's absolutely right. He's saying this is not about getting a cheaper price for running workloads somewhere else. He's saying this is about what we do, in his case as a bank, managing risk, delivering things for customers, increasing cash flow. So you've got two questions when you think of a business case. You can start from a very IT frame of the question and say, should we run apps on AWS, a workload conversation, instead of on-premise? If so, why should we run our workloads somewhere else in someone else's data center? Or you could have another view. You could say, something around workflows, like how do we transform IT operations to deliver better quality faster than our customers and suppliers transform theirs? Is our workflow delivering for our customers and suppliers and our internal people who need to get stuff done? Because if it's not, it doesn't matter where you run the workload. The workload's not performing. It's there to deliver. So think about how much is it going to cost to deliver something, and overall, how risky is the project? Now, when I think about business cases, I find that there are four types. You could have a simple budgetary estimate where you do something like total cost of ownership analysis, and you say your return on investment, including migration costs, is going to be, let's say, 55%. Problem is, it won't be 55%. It could be any number at all based on decision dependencies and risk. And if you haven't looked at that, it must be because this is a very simple decision for you to make. Perhaps you go to having the same budgetary estimate, but with a high, medium, and low, but that looks a bit self-serving because you've picked it to get the money to go and do something. So maybe that doesn't have enough credibility up the chain of command. Once you get into value engineering, and this is something in AWS that we're specializing on increasingly, you're starting to look at the cause and effect relationships between you making an IT decision on where to run workloads and the impact on your organization in the smooth running of workflows. As you get further up, you'll start to talk about the investment appraisal and running risk analysis. So if you make a change, what are the factors that are going to influence the outcome, and what's the likelihood of an outcome? Is it 55%, 10%, 90%? What does your data tell you is the most likely? And you do that running Monte Carlo simulations. I love this tool called Decision Tools from Palisade, from where I did my master's. You've plenty of tools out there. So think about what in an outcome is success. I would say in a commercial sense, it's price to book value. In a government sense, it's probably to do with a scorecard of KPIs around governance as an overall catch-all. If you look down to what are the means objectives, I think you could put most KPIs under we're going to make better use of cash flow, we're going to have a better customer experience, and our controls will be more effective. Under those, you will have KPIs which are related to IT, related to the business. What are the key things? How would you structure a hierarchy of benefits to reflect the outcome that you want? Do that before you make a decision. Communicate it, drive consensus, or there could be a problem. Now, there will always be areas of ambiguity. Model them, be explicit about them. First of all, shadow IT. Shadow IT is feedback. This is the year when, in the commercial sphere, not sure with government, but the commercial sphere, more spend is going through shadow IT and credit cards and the like than is going through the IT budget. And let's not forget Salesforce's tagline, success not software, is really saying, get stuff done, don't worry about the workload, think about the workflow. Now, you have to have transparency, you have to have data. I've mentioned the partners that we work with. Please do reach out to them or your AWS account manager for recommendations. You've also got decision dependencies. If you're not thinking in a system sense, then you're taking a very simplistic view that can go badly wrong. Think about what could go badly wrong and why, and plan for it accordingly. If you write this stuff down and you get feedback within your organization, everyone will be far more likely to get a good outcome. And on the procurement side, try to think less about cost out and try to think more in terms of driving that agility in so that workflows function better and in return drive cost out. I mentioned the need to drive consensus. This cannot be overstated. You cannot make a decision from IT that affects the whole business without involving the business. And on for the value analysis, you might go for a cloud native approach, or you might go for a VMware approach where you can have something kind of in the middle. You might do a TCO, in which case here's an illustrative view of how the line for cloud, which is the orange line, sorry, is the orange line, will change over time as you include more and more things into the equation. And you'll see the orange line keeps going down the more things you consider in your cost equation. Now, I've mentioned modeling ambiguity as being very important, and I'll bring back to this quote from Robert Rubin: there are no absolutes, then all decisions become a matter of judging the probability of different outcomes and the cost of benefits of each. Then on that basis, you can make a good decision. So we can help you with trade-offs analysis. Here's a great government document from the UK, and it will go into a method. We could also help with this. There are also plenty of success benchmarks we can provide that evidence the success that you want to drive. So thank you very much. I would now like to hand over to Neil Hall to talk about procurement routes and optimization programs.
Thank you, John. So now let's look at various ways in which you can procure AWS once you've built your business case and you're ready to move forwards with a cloud deployment or enhance your existing one. Let's look at the different means by which you can procure our services. For some of you, and for many public sector organizations, that will be dictated by your policy, or by the requirements that you procure under a particular framework or in a particular manner, but some of you will have the luxury of a little bit more choice. So with regards to the different options that are available, you have a framework agreement such as G-Cloud or similar public sector framework, or you can procure direct under a single source engagement, or you could procure indirectly via a partner. So if we start out with the available direct options, so firstly and most traditionally we have the AWS customer agreement. For anybody who's set up an account with AWS, you'll be familiar. It's otherwise known as our click-through agreement, and it's the standard way in which 95% of all organizations contract with AWS in order to gain access to our services and start their cloud journey. It's designed to be compatible with all of our services. It's future-proofed and it's updated on a regular basis. And a key benefit of this mechanism is that it is designed to allow our customers to access all of the optimization programs and mechanisms we've got to help support your business case and help drive down cost. We also have a version of the customer agreement known as the enterprise agreement. This is for customers who are who need a degree of customization of our standard terms and conditions, and it's designed for those enterprise level customers, or in the case of public sector, it's there to help address some of those requirements such as Freedom of Information Act and those elements that are specific to your area of business. Then we have a variation of this, which we've termed collective buying agreement, but it's any way in which maybe you as a collective organization can look to leverage a larger buying power and buy as a particular collective. So this sort of arrangement is again based on our customer agreement or enterprise agreement, but it allows a group of organizations to gather together and procure under one vehicle through AWS, consolidate your spend in order to be able to access discount programs and mechanisms that you may not otherwise be able to access if you were just buying individually. So a great example of this would be a group of education institutions, a group of healthcare trusts, or any organization where you're able to coordinate as a group and improve your buying power and therefore improve your ability to reach higher levels of optimization. So then the other way we have is via our partners. So we have a very strong network of partners that is designed to support our customers and help to bridge the gap between the services that AWS delivers, and there may be some form of skills gap or knowledge gap that you need an organization to help fill for you, and that's where one of our partners can come into play. So our partners are well trained and supported to be able to help bridge those gaps for you, and you would contract with the partner, and the partner can then contract with AWS and access our programs, and then they will package those up and manage those for you. So if we look at what's available, if we start with our direct and indirect agreements, this is in many ways the easiest for me to talk about, because we have all of our optimization programs available for either the indirect or the direct routes. I can't list out all of them because there are too many to fit on a slide deck or to be able to talk through in the time we have available. But whether you are procuring direct from AWS via our customer agreement or enterprise agreement, or whether a partner is managing your environment and procuring AWS on your behalf, either you or the partner can access all of the different offerings that AWS have. So for example, we have free trials, we have our reserved instances, which many people will be familiar with, where you can have either a 1 or 3 year commitment in order to be able to use a certain amount of compute capability. You can select how you wish to pay for that, whether that's upfront, whether that's over the term, but that allows you to drive down a significant amount of cost on your compute instances. We then have the enterprise discount program, which is colloquially termed the EDP, which again is another mechanism which you can combine with reserved instances to be able to, again, drive down cost by committing to leverage, to use a certain amount of computing over typically between 1 to 5 years. And again, it helps to drive down a significant amount of cost in your deployment. And then another key program that we have is our migration acceleration program, which is designed to help customers who are looking to migrate significant workloads to AWS. And the program is there to help support and mitigate that migration cost bubble that one gets when you're looking to do a migration and you've got some periods of parallel running, you've got additional consultancy costs associated with that, and the migration acceleration program is there to help ease those issues at the time when you're taking those large migrations over to AWS. We then have a range of smaller incentive programs. Again, I've got a few examples down here, but this is by no means an exhaustive list. Again, just reach out to your account manager if you want to know which schemes may be relevant for you and that you may be able to leverage. So if we then look at the framework agreements, if you are an agency that is required to buy from AWS under a compliant framework that is managed by a government organization, then we have a couple of options available for customers as well. So firstly, and most recently, we have the Yorkshire Procurement Office contract. So this is a framework that went live in August, and it runs on a tender process mechanism where an organization puts forth their requirements, and then AWS and any other suppliers who are on the framework are able to respond to those requirements. The benefit of this mechanism is that it enables suppliers to be able to respond specifically to the requirements and the use case that the customer puts forward, which means that you can offer some bespoke or tailored optimization options that specifically suits the intended use, which is unique insofar as contracting with AWS goes, because which we'll move on to next, G-Cloud, where we don't have that option available to us because discount mechanisms have to be published up front, and there's a prohibition against any customized offerings or individual one-off incentives that a supplier could offer. So the unique benefit of the Yorkshire Procurement Office agreement is that ourselves and any other supplier would be able to respond specifically to a particular requirement. At the moment, there's not a huge amount of information that's publicly available, but there's a link here in the slide where you can contact YPO, see whether it's an agreement that you as a public sector organization could leverage, and we would be happy to help facilitate that discussion if that's required. So then we have probably the most well-known mechanism and the one that the majority of our public sector customers use, which is the G-Cloud 11 framework. So as we go through the different programs that are available here, one thing that I'd just like to make clear is whilst these programs have their own unique names, they are in effect versions of the same programs that are available under our direct or indirect routes. They have different names to them because they've been customized and tweaked slightly in order to work under the unique terms and conditions of G-Cloud. However, they are comparable and attempt to mirror the same mechanisms that we offer to either our direct or indirect contract routes. So the intention is to make sure that whether you are buying under a framework such as G-Cloud, or whether you are buying under our customer agreement, enterprise agreement, or buying through a partner, all of our customers would be on a level playing field and can access all of the same benefits. So on G-Cloud 11, we've currently got 250 services, all of them pay as you go, covering infrastructure, software, ProServe, training. So we've attempted to put our entire portfolio on there, or as much as it's ever possible to do when you only have a once a year opportunity to be able to list your services. So we have our free tier trials. We have reserved instances on there. We have both the 1 and the 3 year options, although we do appreciate that call off contract terms are 2 years as an initial term. So the 3-year option may not be possible. However, we wanted to make sure that the option was there if you as an organization are able to find a way to still contract for those services. We then have 3 main programs, for want of a better word. We have the government deployment program, the volume commitment program, and the government migration program. So those are the 3 main mechanisms for optimization. However, we have also put onto G-Cloud 11 our advanced payment program, whereby if you have an amount of budget that you just simply want to release in order to be able to make sure that you have that budget available for cloud, then there's a mechanism for you to pay up front and get that money as a credit onto your account. We then have what we've grouped as customer acceleration programs, but this goes back to those incentive programs such as our hackathon credits, the research grants and data egress waivers that we have for education organizations, those mechanisms where you've got smaller credit programs for particular requirements. Those would all be grouped under our customer acceleration program. So if we look at our 3 larger programs, the first is the Government Deployment Program, or GDP. So this is a 1-year program where the customer pays $2 million upfront, and in return, that $2 million becomes a positive balance on your account, and then you will receive enterprise support for free on all of your accounts for that 12-month period. So that equates to a minimum saving of $180,000 over the term, which, when you're looking purely from a bottom line perspective, equates to the equivalent of a 7 to 8% discount, which if you were to take the enterprise discount program under our direct agreement, you would get a very similar outcome. It's just an alternative mechanism to achieve that same savings result for you. A key benefit of the GDP is that it does encourage customers to use enterprise support. And where we see customers use enterprise support, personally, continuously hearing very positive feedback about the technical account managers, the way in which enterprise support helps customers to generate further efficiencies, understand how to use AWS services in the most cost-effective manner, and get the most out of their cloud usage. So the second program is the volume commitment program. This is intended for customers whose level of consumption has gone beyond the requirement for the GDP. So this is a 2-year term program, and there are 3 options available to customers, 3 options of prepayment, depending on your level of consumption, obviously increasing as your consumption increases. So the VCP is in many ways similar in mechanism to the GDP, in that it's an upfront commitment, but with it being a 2-year term, it's 2 1-year upfront payments, one in year 1, one in year 2. Professional services, when you become a participant of the VCP, you would also receive an equivalent discount off of any professional services that you may procure from AWS as well. But one thing to point out is the GDP and the VCP are mutually exclusive programs. You can't run them both at the same time. The intention is that the VCP is for customers who have moved beyond the need for a GDP, and we wouldn't see those 2 programs working together. So here are the 3 different tiers of the VCP. So the tiers are 8 million over the 2-year term, 20 million or 40 million, each with an improving level of discount off of the services that we list. You could see in the middle column your per annum payment. So, for example, the option 3 2-year term, it would be a 4 million per year upfront payment for 2 years during the call-off term, and you would receive an 11% discount off of all of your infrastructure services, off of your professional services, and that 4 million per year would become a positive balance on your account, and then you would draw down on that as you consume services over the term. So you can see that, for a customer that knows they're going to be leveraging a lot of cloud services, that is intending to continue to grow and advance their cloud journey with AWS, these mechanisms are there to help you drive down cost even further. And then when you introduce enterprise support, and we look at other ways in which you can optimize with reserved instances, with our other credit programs as well, the combination of all of these can really significantly positively impact your ability to drive down cost. The final program to talk about is the government migration program. So this is in effect our migration acceleration program, simply renamed in order to work under G-Cloud, because typically our migration acceleration program would go hand in hand with an EDP, but because we don't have EDPs under G-Cloud, because the terms and conditions, we instead have the VCP. So someone who's adopting the government migration program would also always be a VCP customer, and the mechanism behind this is, as you are looking to migrate new workloads onto AWS, we would do an assessment with you to understand that those net new migrations exceed a certain amount, and then we would provide you with additional credits that you can spend on AWS infrastructure in order to help drive down those migration costs and in order to help support your move to the cloud. So that's my last slide. So at this point, I'd like to say thank you all for your time and for listening to both John and myself. A survey will pop up on your screen. If we could ask that you please take a couple of minutes in order to fill that out. Myself and John's emails are available here on the slide deck, which will be shared with you afterwards. Please feel free to reach out to either of us or to your account manager if you have any further questions. I guess at this point then, I'd just like to hand it back over to our organizer to see whether there are any questions that we've had from attendees via text. Or if we haven't had any, I guess now is an opportunity if you'd like to type something into the chat window. If you have any questions for us at this stage, we'll just give it a couple of minutes, give people an opportunity to type out any questions they may have. So I do have one question that's come through. So this is a question for me. So the question is the discount for only government clients or for private corporations as well? So for government clients, well, I guess there's two ways of answering this question. So the discounts are not necessarily unique to government or to private sector. The mechanisms of accessing those discounts are just different depending on which procurement vehicle you use. So if you are a government customer who is buying from AWS directly, then you would access our enterprise discount program or MAP program via our direct contract. If, however, as a government customer, you're required to buy under a compliant framework like G-Cloud, then you would access our GDP, VCP, and GMP programs instead, although fundamentally you're still accessing the same benefit, just with some unique tailoring that was necessary for G-Cloud. And then with regards to private organizations, again, if you're buying direct from AWS, again, you would just use the EDP and MAP program. But you know, if you are a partner and you're leveraging your partner agreement with AWS, again, it would be those EDP and MAP programs. So then another question is, would we treat UK housing associations the same as education? That's a good question. I don't know the answer on the call, or I wouldn't like to guess and be incorrect. I believe I know the answer, but I think if you could give us your contact details, we can follow up with you after. I'd rather not hazard a guess and then prove to be incorrect. So then third question is, have we got a G-Cloud framework for the civil service, e.g. HMRC or Treasury? I'm not 100% clear on what that question is, but with regards to the agreements that we have in place with our government agencies, that they are publicly available. So Crown Commercial Service publish information around G-Cloud spend, what public sector organizations are spending with AWS and with any suppliers. So you can access the govspend.co.uk website, and you can use that to see which public sector organizations are leveraging AWS through G-Cloud. Okay, I believe that's all of the questions that we have. So at this point, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody, and just another reminder again, if you could please fill out the survey, it would be much appreciated. And thank you very much.